the bottom of Yud Gimel and base. Amr l'cha Rav Menashe. Rav Menashe will tell you, no, Kuli al Masavri HaKotel L'Sachech Ein Lo Yodos. He'll tell you, both opinions in the Brisa agree to my halacha, which is that if a person cut down to use it as schach, there's no status of yados. The handle does not get the status of a yad, which means that if tumah came in contact with the handle, it would not affect the entire branch. Because of his svar, which is, since I can't use the fruit as schach, so I'm not happy. I don't need the connection between the handle and the fruit. Okay, so if you want to say everyone agrees to you, so then what's the case they were talking about and having a disagreement? So hachav mayaskina, what's the case they were talking about? That first, when the person cut it down, he cut down a branch with a fruit at the end in order to eat it. And on that day, everybody would agree that the handle has the status of a yad, and therefore if tumah touched the handle, the whole thing would become tummy. But then what happened, that they're having a disagreement, nimlach aleh l'sikoch. That branch which at a point in time was able to be makabel tumah, now the person switched and said, I want to use it for my sukkah. So he's saying, if you cut it down to use it for your sukkah, everyone agrees that there's no halachic status given to the handle to be able to become tummy. The case they're talking about is he cut it down to eat, which on that day everyone agrees it could, yes, become tummy. And now he switched. In his mind, he switched to use it for schach. And that would mean now there's a machlokas, there's a disagreement. How do you deal with that case when he switched? Ask the Gemara, if you're right that that's the case, that he originally cut it down to eat, which means everyone agrees on that day, it was able to become tummy. Now he switched in his mind. What would be the explanation of the Rabbanan, which said that it cannot become tummy? Right? We're fine with the opinion that said since it was able to become tummy when he cut it down, so nothing switches. But what's the explanation of the opinion that since he switched in his mind to use it for schach, now it can't become tummy? Maybe you'll tell me the Rabbanan hold that since he switched in his head to use it for a different purpose, for schach, therefore the handle loses its status of being able to become tummy. Ask the Gemara, is that true? Would his mindset to use it for something different change the status of the handle? That's none. We learned in the Mishnah. That when a person is making something into the definition of a kli, which is what allows it to become tummy, so the Mishnah tells us that a person can decide in his head, which means if he makes up in his head what he's going to use this item for, Rashi says we're talking about like a hide. Okay, so you have a hide. If he makes up in his head that I'm going to use it for a tablecloth, so nothing else needs to be done with it. So now it's a tablecloth. You just decided, and therefore it could become tummy. But something which can already become tummy, impure, the only way to stop that status is to do something physical to it. That a maisa, a physical change to the object, can take it out from being able to become tamei, whether it became able to become tamei with a mindset or with a physical action. A physical action, a maisa to it, can stop that status. But something which could already become tamei, you cannot switch that status just with a mindset. So what the Gemara is asking is, he told us if you cut it down for schach, everybody agrees that there's no status given to the handle to be able to become tummy. He said, what's the case they're disagreeing about? He cut it down to eat it. And that day, the handle was, yes, able to become tummy. And the person switched and said he's going to use it for schach. Ask the Gemara, if he switched, what's the explanation for the opinion that says it lost its status? You can't lose a status of becoming able to become tamei just by switching in your mind, because the Mishnah told us something which is a kli, something which is a utensil, which means now it's capable of becoming tamei, and you switched your mind, it doesn't switch its status. If it was a kli, the only way to make it not a kli is to do something physical to the object. Says the Gemara, maybe you'll tell me that Mishnah is true on something which is a kli, something which is a utensil itself. Aval yados de letzarech achila ninu, but our case, which is just the handle of the food. So in other words, the only reason it's tamei is because it's secondary to something else. It's not a utensil by itself. It's secondary to the thing which is tamei, which there's a halacha that says the handle's also tamei. So maybe you'll tell me yados, which is secondary to the food, b'machshava nasev machshava salka. So maybe in that case, it's easier to take away its status of becoming tamei because it's, so to speak, it's not a lower level of tumah, but it's less of a reason that it can become tamei. It's a secondary reason. The only reason the handle can become tamei is because it's attached to a food which can become tamei. So the Gemara is saying maybe the Mishnah, which told us a mindset can't take away the status, that's by something which is a kli. It's a utensil itself. But the handle, which is only tamei because it's secondary to the food, maybe the disagreement between these two opinions would be if a mindset can take away that status. Vatanan, but we learned kol yadas ha'ochlan shebasasan, that the handles of food shebasasan, I'm leaving that word vague on purpose because the Gemara is going to talk about what that means. But gorin taharis, in the granary is tahar. So let's see. Bish lamalamanda amar basasan hitter ugdan shaper. Gemara says, according to the opinion that translates that word basasan as meaning you undid the tie, which means you didn't do anything physically to the items, you didn't affect the items, you just undid the tie. So if the opinion who says it means that all you did was undo the tie, which Rashi says is the equivalent of a machshava, a switch in the person's mindset, what he's going to do with his item, then shaper, then I understand. Which means that here's a Mishnah which talked about something which is only tamei because it's the yad of something else. It's the handle of something else. And the Mishnah said that if you were basasan, then it's tahar. So if basasan means person switched with his mind, right? He undid the tie, which Rashi says is the equivalent of just in his mind switching the purpose of this handle. So then that would be a good explanation of the brisa. Because I could tell you that if something is the status of a kli itself, a utensil itself, then everybody agrees switching in your mindset to use it for a different purpose does not take away its ability to become tamei. But our case, which is only tamei because it's a yad, it's a handle for the food, so then we've found such a disagreement that something which is only tamei for a secondary reason, so to speak, because it's tafel to the food itself, so then you could tell me that since it's only tamei, it's only able to become tamei for a secondary reason, then even just with a switch in the mindset, one opinion holds that you can change that status and make it no longer a yad. Elamad Amar my basasan mamish, but according to the Amora who explained that Mishnah, that when the Mishnah said you took this yad of the food and you were basasan, he translated the word basasan meant you smashed it up, which means you did a maisa, you physically affected the item. So my ikalamemar. According to that opinion, we've never found anybody who even by a yad, something which is tamei because it's tafel to the food, we've never found anybody that said a switch in mindset can affect the status of the thing. Okay, so in other words, if something's a kli, a utensil, that we're saying the Mishnah told us that nobody holds just switching with your mindset will take its status away of being a kli. Okay, if it was a kli, a utensil, and it can become tamei, a switch in mindset will not change that status. Okay, what about something which is only tamei because it's a handle for food? So we're saying there's a Mishnah that talked about that. There was a disagreement between two Amoraim what happened in that Mishnah. If what happened was you just switched your mindset, so we found the source for something which is only tummy for a secondary reason, being more lenient in changing its status of being able to become tummy. But if you translate that word basasan as meaning you affected the object, which means you did a maisa, so then we've never found anybody who was more lenient in changing the status of something that could become tummy. So the Gemara says, Hachanami shebasasan mamish. So Gemara says, according to that opinion, I'll tell you what happened. What happened in the brisa? The person cut it down for schach, which means at that point the handle was able to become tummy. Then what did he do? Then he smushed it up, and therefore one opinion holds, meaning since he smushed it up, so that's doing a maisa, that's physically affecting the object, and that's why the Rabbanan would hold that since he was even though he originally cut it down to eat, which gave the handle a status of being able to come tummy, but since he did a maisa to it, he physically affected the object to use it for schach, to take off the food, therefore it lost its halachic status as a yad. Says the Gemara, if that's true, you explained the first opinion, which was, even though it was able to become tamei, since I physically affected it, I switched it. What's the opinion that holds that it's still able to become tamei? If I physically affected it, then everybody should agree that it lost its ability to become tummy. Gemara says, no, the Amr Reb Yossi. They'll hold like the opinion of Reb Yossi. The Tanan, Reb Yossi matami. Because Reb Yossi held at that Mishnah that even though you physically affected it, it's still tummy. Says the Gemara, Hi my bishlam mahasar time with Reb Yossi chazi like Reb Shimon ben Lakish. The Amr Reb Shimon ben Lakish hoel v'ru'uyas lahovchem ba'atar. The reason over there that Reb Yossi holds it's tummy is because what the person there was doing, he cut it down to eat it. Now he switched it and put it in his granary. The reason Reb Yossi holds the yad, is still able to become tamei, even though the person's physically affecting it, is because there's a reason that he still wants that handle attached, even though he's already holding at the granary. Because why? When he needs to flip it around with his utensil, to move the things around for whatever he's doing there, it makes it easier if there's something else to grab onto, which is that piece of wood. It says the Gemara, in our case, where the person cut it down to eat, and now he switched to use it for schach, so if he physically affected the item to switch it to use it for schach, so what would be the explanation of Reb Yossi saying that the yad, the handle, could still become tummy? There's no reason, seemingly, there's no reason why he still wants the wood attached to the fruit. The Gemara says, no, he wants it because it's going to be easier to move it around if the whole thing is connected. Okay, so I'm going to try to summarize outside. This is a little new concept and it's a little confusing. But just to go back to yesterday for 1 second. If a person cut down a branch in order to use the grape for wine, so the Gemara there said everybody agrees that wood, that handle of the grape, does not have the status of a yad, which means that if the branch became in contact with tumah, let's say it touched a person who passed away, it would not affect the fruit. So why is that? The reason normally there's a halacha of a yad, of the handle of the fruit, is because I want the connection between the two. But if you're cutting it down to use the grapes to make wine, where you don't want the branch, so even though, yes, they're connected, but since I don't want the connection, because for my purpose of the fruit, I don't want the branch here, everybody agreed there's no status of a yad. Okay, so that was the first thing everybody agreed to. Now we had a disagreement. The person cut down a branch to use it for schach. At the end of the branch, there was some type of fruit. We could talk about the same case of a grape. Okay, you cut down a branch, and there was a grape at the end, and a person's going to use it for schach. So now the grape, I cannot use as schach. The branch, I could use as schach. So one opinion said, since the grape is useless to make my sukkah kosher, so therefore I don't want the connection between the two, and therefore there's no halachic status of a yad, of a handle, Therefore, if it became in contact with a dead person, it would not make it tummy. The other opinion said, as much as the grape can't make your sukkah kosher, but it's going to help the weight of your schach so that it doesn't fly away in the wind. So therefore, you do want the connection, and therefore, if it came in contact, it would yes become tummy. Okay, so that was the disagreement we had yesterday. Then we had a brisa, which seemed to be the same thing as the disagreement between the two. So the Gemara said, according to one, you're right. It's going to have to be that he's going to agree one opinion's like him, one opinion's not like him. But according to the other one who said that there's no halachic status of a yad, so is there any way for him to read the brisa that both opinions agree to his halacha, and he'll tell you the brisa is talking about a different case? The Gemara said, yeah. He'll tell you, if you cut it down for schach, everyone agrees that there's no halachic status given to the handle. The case of the brisa was a different case. You cut it down to eat, which on that day everybody agrees it yes had the status of a handle, because that's how you're going to hold it. Then you switched to use it for schach. Now, what's the disagreement in the brisa in that case? So you could say it in one of two ways, which is what we just talked about. You could either say that even though something which is a utensil and is able to become tamei, to switch that status, you have to physically affect it. You have to do a maisa to the object. But you could tell me that something which is only tamei because it's a yad for the food, which means it's like secondary to the food, the handle for the food. So then the machlokas in the brisa could be is something which is only tamei because it's secondary to the food. It assists the food. So maybe the disagreement is, with a mindset, can you switch the status? That means one opinion would say, even though it was able to become tamei because you cut it down to eat, switching the mindset will make it lose its status of being a yad, being the handle. And the other opinion will say that no, that even something which is only secondary to the food, with a mindset you can't switch it, you would have to physically affect it. That would be one way to read it. If you read it the other way, which is the case would be you physically affected it, so one opinion would be easier to understand, which was since you physically affected it, it lost its status of being a yad. The second opinion who said it retained its status would have to hold that there's some reason you still really want that connection, which is it's still going to be easier to maneuver off your sukkah, which would allow it to remain its status. So in other words, you learn the machlokas either as you switched your mindset, and the disagreement is on this type of item, the switching a mindset take away its status, or the case is you physically affected it, and the machlokas is even though you physically affected it, is there still some reason you still really want the attachment? Okay, I hope that was clear. Okay, Gufa. Now the Gemara is just gonna speak over something that it was referring to before. Kol yadas ha'ochlan shebasis on begarin taharis. The Mishnah says that if you have a handle of a food which you were basis on, so again, that was what we just had a machlokas, how to translate that word. If you were basis on, which either meant you undid the tie, which Rashi said is like a switch in your mindset because you didn't affect the object, or you smushed it, begarin taharis. Rabbi Yossi's matami. Rabbi Yossi disagrees and says it's still tummy. My basis on, what is the word basis on? Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi basis on mamish. Rabbi Yochanan said you smushed it up. Rabbi Lazar Amar Hitter Ugdun. Rabbi Lazar said it meant you just undid the tie. Bish Malarib Elazar Damar Basis and Hitter Ugdun Haina time with Rabbi Yossi. According to Rabbi Lazar, who said all you did was undo the knot, which is like switching your mindset. So Rabbi Yossi's disagreeing and saying switching your mindset doesn't take away its status. And therefore, since it already had the status of a yad, and therefore, if Tuma touched it, it would yes become Tamei. Switching your mindset doesn't affect that. But ask the Gemara, but if you tell me Basas and Mamish means you smushed it up, you physically affected it, so why would Rabbi Yossi argue on that? So like we quoted before, that since there was still a benefit for the attachment to make it easier to maneuver with your utensil that you're using, therefore, Rabbi Yossi held it still has the status of a yad. Amar Rabbi Lazar, Lama Nimshala Tfilasan Shal Tzadikim Ta'atar. That the pasuk says Yitzhak, vayetar Yitzhak Lashem. So vayetar is a type of kli, utensil used to flip around the stalks or whatever in the granary. So why did the pasuk use the word vayetar as referring to davening? Why is the tefillah of a tzaddik compared to an atar? Just like this utensil is able to flip around the grain, the stalks from place to place. The tefillah of a tzaddik is able to switch the way Hashem deals with the world from a midah of din, of punishment, to a midah of rachmanas, of mercy. So it's bringing out the power of tefillah, that it's able to switch the hanhaga, the way Hashem is dealing with the world, just like this utensil is able to switch the places where the items are. Okay, the Mishnah says, Mesachachim b'nesarim divrei Reb Yehuda. Okay, let's say a person goes to Home Depot and buys 8x4s. Yeah, big wood boards. Okay, it grows from the ground. It's not makabel tuma, right? So we should be good to go. Says the Mishnah. Mesachim b'nesarim divrei Reb Yehuda. Reb Yehuda says you can use big wood boards for a sukkah. Reb Meir Oser. Reb Meir says you're not allowed to. Okay, I'm just looking if I should explain it now or if the Gemara is going to say it in a second. Okay, let's hold on for a second. Then the Mishnah says that if you put a board which is 4 tefachim wide, tefach is roughly, a person could just look at his hand for an estimate. If it's more than 4 tefachim wide, it's ksheira, assuming you don't sleep under it. Okay, so the Gemara is going to talk about how to read this last line of the Mishnah, so I'm leaving that vague for a second. Rav says, Rav says, the case the Mishnah was talking about is if the wood board was 4 tefachim wide. To Reb Meir is like Gzeiras Tikra. Reb Meir holds it's a problem. Gzeiras Tikra, so here Rashi explains, means that if a person's roof out of his house, so let's think about a house a couple of years ago. Okay, if a person's house, the roof was only made out of wood beams, wood boards. Okay, so a person would say, "Oh, this looks like a good sukkah, right? It's made out of schach. It's made out of wood, grows from the ground. It's not makabel tuma. So what should be the problem?" So Rashi says the reason that's a problem is because when the pasuk said sit in a sukkah, it's coming to the exclusion of your house of the rest of the year. Okay, so that's no good. If a person's house was the roof was just made out of wood beams, the reason it's a problem is because the Torah said, go sit in a sukkah, which means not your house. Okay, now a person makes his sukkah out of the same exact material which his roof of his house is made out of. Says Reb Meir, if I allow him to eat in that sukkah, then people are going to think there's no difference between eating in a sukkah and eating in his house. People are going to end up just staying in their house for sukkahs, which is no good. Rabbi Yehuda less like Gzeiras Tikra. And Rabbi Yehuda says, I'm not concerned with that. I agree the person can't just eat in his house in sukkahs, but as long as he makes a new sukkah, even though he uses the exact same materials as his roof, as he used to build his house, it's fine. But if the boards are under 4, Rav says everyone agrees that's fine. So in other words, Rav saying the disagreement in the Mishnah is by very big boards. Reb Meir held we made a decree, people are going to get confused. Rabbi Yehuda said, we didn't make such a decree. But if it's small boards, everyone agrees. Shmuel says the opposite. No, the disagreement is if the boards are less than 4. If it's 4 tefachim wide, everybody agrees we made a decree. What's the disagreement? If the boards are less than 4, the Reb Meir said we still made a decree, people are going to get confused, and Reb Yehuda said not. Ask the Gemara, if you're telling me the disagreement is by boards less than 4 tefachim, so where are you going to draw the line? You're going to stop me from putting any piece of wood on my sukkah? Now that's what you make schach out of. So Amar Pabana Hachi Kamar, this is what he means to say. Yesh ben arba dirakal psula. Shmuel saying, if it's 4 tefachim wide, everyone agrees that's a problem. Palchas mishlosha dirakal ksheira. If it's less than 3, everyone agreed that's fine. My time akana ba'almaninu, that's a piece of wood. Ki pligi, what's the disagreement in the Mishnah? Mishlosha ad arba. What if it's a board which is between 3 and 4 tvach? Mar savar, kaven de lesnu shir makam lo gazrinan. Rabbi Yehuda, who was lenient, said that since in defining what's called a makam, what's called a place, in Hilchas Shabbos, the definition is 4 tvachim, so that's like a finite number we find in other places. So that was the number Chazal gave to this decree. Umar Savar, Reb Meir holds, came with an afkim Torah's Lavud Gazrina, that since by Lavud, I don't know if you touched upon it at all yet, but there's a Hilchas of Lavud, which means something which is less than 3 tvachim together, halachically is called closed. So Reb Meir holds that since we found in that place a shear, the measurement given is less than 3 tvachim, so that was the number Chazal used regarding this decree. So in other words, they're saying in different places we found different numbers for different halachas, and their disagreement was in this decree, what was the gauge Chazal used in making the finite number for the decree. So again, Rav saying the disagreement in the Mishnah is, did they make a decree that a person will get confused between his sukkah and his house if he uses the same roof materials? Reb Meir held yes, and Reb Yehuda held no, I'm not concerned people are going to make that mistake. According to Shmuel, everybody holds if it's 4 tvachim wide that they made a decree. People are going to make a mistake between his sukkah and his house. What's the disagreement? Did they even make the decree on the case if it's a board between 3 and 4 tvach? says the Gemara, Tanan. The Mishnah said, Nasan Allah Neser Shurachav Arba Tvachim Ksheira Ubilvad Shelo Yishin Tachta. Person put on a board which is 4 tvachim wide. It's kosher as long as you don't sleep under it. Bishma l'shmuel dam shem ben arba machlokas yesh ben arba derakal psula shem hachi lo yishin tachta. According to Shmuel, who said that if it's 4 tvachim wide, everyone agrees it's no good. That's why the Mishnah said you're not allowed to sleep under it. Elul Rav the Amar sheish ben arba machlokas, but Rav who said that the machlokas is when it's 4 tvachim wide. Val ein ben arba derakal ksheira. But he said if it's less than 4, everyone holds that it's okay. According to Rav, assuming the last line in the Mishnah is both opinions, even Reb Yehuda, so why would the Mishnah say if you have a board 4 tvachim wide, you can't sleep under it? According to Rav, Reb Yehuda held we never made any such decree, which means you can take a huge wood board and it's 100% kosher. You could take a huge, however big your sukkah is, 8 by 12. If you can find a piece of wood which is 8 by 12, according to Rav's Reb Yehuda, you could just put a slat of wood straight across your sukkah. Okay, that might be a little too much for other problems. Okay, but you get the point. In other words, you can have big boards covering up your sukkah, and it's schach kosher. So why would the end of the Mishnah say, according to Rav's Reb Yehuda, you can't sleep under it? That sounds like it's not good schach. So Rav will say, Mi savas divrei hakoli, seifa san the Reb Meir. No, the seifa, the end of the Mishnah is only Reb Meir. So look back at the Mishnah for one more second. The Mishnah says, Mesachechim ben asarim de Reb Yehuda. According to Rav, it means, even though it's 4 tvachim wide, you could use them as schach. Reb Meir says, Oser, you're not allowed to use those boards. I'm concerned that a person will get confused between his sukkah and his house. According to Rav, the next line is only Reb Meir talking. If you put on that big board, which is no good, your sukkah can still be kosher, but you can't sleep under it because it's not kosher schach. According to Reb Yehuda, that's not true. According to Shmuel, that last line, Nasan Allah Neser, is true according to both opinions. That if it's 4 tefachim wide, everyone agrees it's a problem. Okay, Tashema Shnei Sadinim, you have 2 types of like a cloth material, are mitztarfin. They add together to make 4 tefachim of not good schach. Shnei nesarim ein mitztarfin. If you have 2 boards, they don't add together. Rabbi Meir Omer af nisarim kisadinim. Rabbi Meir says the two boards do add together to make the sukkah no good. Okay, so that was what the Brisa said. So now we have in our head we have a machlokas Rav and Shmuel. What was the machlokas? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. Was the machlokas, did we make such a gzeira? Or everyone held we made such a gzeira? The machlokas is, did we even make it between 3 and 4 tvach? So it says the Gemara, Bishma l'Shmuel damar b'shein ben arba machlokas. According to Shmuel, who says that if it's that the machlokas is if it's between 3 and 4, al yesh ben arba divrei kol psula. But once you hit 4 tvachim, everyone agrees it's a problem. So my mitzdarfin l'arba. The way to read Reb Meir's words will be is that the two boards can be mitzdaref to make a shear of 4 tvachim. But according to Rav, who says the machlokas is if it's 4 tvachim, if it's less than 4, then everyone agrees it's okay. So heichi dami, right? Reb Meir said you can add together two boards to make an amount of schach pasel. The amount of schach pasel, which is a problem, is 4 tvachim in the middle of the sukkah. Okay, Rav said that if the board is less than 4 tvachim, it's fine. If it's 4 tvachim, it's a problem. Reb Meir's statement was you can add together two boards to make the shear of 4 tvachim. So says the Gemara, what's the case? Ida is ba lamalutz darufi. If the wood board in the middle of the person's sukkah is 4 tvachim wide, so then the one board is a problem. Why does Reb Meir have to say I can add together the two boards to make the amount which is a problem? One board by itself is a problem. And ida les buarba, and if you'll tell me the materials in the sukkah, the wood board is less than 4 tvachim, so then what's the problem? So then Reb Meir agrees it's okay. In other words, Reb Meir is saying, because you have two different boards next to each other, it adds up to 4 tvachim of not good schach and messes up your sukkah. Okay? So says the Gemara, if you tell me the Reb Meir holds it's a problem by 3 tvachim, then it makes sense. I'll tell you, both boards in the sukkah were 3 tvachim, which each one by itself would not mess up the whole sukkah. Says Reb Meir, because the 2 3 tvachim boards are next to each other, so now they add up to 6 tvachim of schach pasel, which in the middle of the sukkah will mess up your sukkah. But according to Rav, who says that if it's less than 4 tvachim, everything's totally fine. So that means it can't be 2 cases of 3 tvachim boards, because then there's nothing wrong in your sukkah. And if you want to tell me the case is it's a 4 tefach board, so then it's a problem just to have one. Why is Reb Meir saying because you have 2 of them, it's going to be a problem? So it's a question on Rav's understanding of Reb Meir. So the Gemara answers, no, la'olam de'isbahu arba. Really, the case is that there are 4 tefachim boards. Umay mitzdarfen la'arba amas min hatzad. You thought the case was that the wood, the schach, was in the middle of the sukkah, and therefore you were getting stuck. No, the Brisa was talking about if the schach was coming from the wall of the sukkah, and there's a hilchasa, there's a halach l'mush from Sinai, we learned that up to dalet amos you can say dofen akuma, which means up to dalet amos of not good schach. There's a halacha that tells us you can view that as if it's an extension of the wall, and therefore even though your wall physically ends here, if this is not good schach, you can view it as if the wall continues up to 4 amos. So Reb Meir is saying that if you have these wood boards of 4 tvachim, which are no good, and it's next to the sukkah, and if you have enough of them that you hit dalet amos away from your wall, in other words, you just 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. So if you get with outside of the amount of dalet amos from your wall, so it's mitzdarfin, they add together to make the shear of more than 4 amos to mess up your sukkah. Okay, so again, the question was, if it's in the middle of the sukkah, if it's less than 4 tvachim, according to Rav, then it's kosher schach. If it's 4 tvachim, then it's not good schach, but one of them will possibly your sukkah. Why is Reb Meir saying because you have 2 next to each other, it's going to make your sukkah no good? So the Gemara's answer is, the case is not when it's in the middle. The case is where it's next to the wall. and therefore one of them is not good schach, but it's going to be fine because I'll say dofen akuma. And even though my wall physically ends here, in halacha the wall really ends here. If I add another one, I'm still fine. I'll say dofen akuma through 8 tvachim. But if I get enough that I'm outside of 4 amas, which means I'm past 24 tvachim from the wall, okay, so if I had enough, I guess I need 7 boards. I have 7 boards, which means I'm 28 tvachim from the wall. So then Reb Meir is saying the 4 tvachim boards, which are schach puzzle, add together to make a shear of more than 4 tvachim to knock out your wall and memela, and therefore knocks out your sukkah. Okay, lishnach, a different way to read, a different way that this raya, this proof was presented. According to Shmuel, who said, everyone agrees if it's 4 tefachim, it's no good. The disagreement between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda is, did we even make a decree on a board between 3 and 4 tefachim? So my mitztarfin la'arba amas min atzad. So what does it mean when Reb Yehuda said it's not mitztarif? It means that it's not mitztarif if you add it up, right? According to Reb Yehuda, if you had 4 tefachim, then he agrees we made a decree. Reb Yehuda's opinion would be saying, but they cannot add up if you did it from the side in order to make it more than 4 amas to knock off your wall. In other words, Reb Yehuda would be saying, before we were talking in Reb Meir, in this version, Reb Yehuda would be saying, even though we made a decree that 4 tvachim, a 4 tvachim slab of wood is a problem, because of a concern a person will get confused between his sukkah and the roof of his house. So Reb Yehuda would be saying, despite the fact that it's schach pasel, ein mitztarfen. If you have 2 of them next to each other, we don't deal with it really as schach pasel to add together to make a problem. Where would it have made a problem? You have enough coming off your wall to get outside of your dalaramas to knock off the option of dofen akuma. Rabbi Yehuda is saying, even though each of them by themselves are schach pasel, which means you can't sit under it, but since midoraisa it's really fine, we didn't give it the full stringency of schach pasel to allow them to add together to take away my possibility of dofen akuma. So according to Shmuel, that's what ein mitztarfen means. Elo Rav. But according to Rav, bishmal Reb Meir, my mitztarfen lam avos min atzad. According to Rav, I understand. Again, Rav said the disagreement is, did you make a decree? Reb Meir held we were concerned and we made a decree, and Reb Yehuda held that even if you use 4 tefachim slabs, everything's fine. So Gemara says, according to Reb Meir, I can understand the brisa, because the case is, if you started from the side, the Reb Meir is saying is you add up in order to knock off the option of saying dofen akuma. El Reb Yehuda dam rafilu yeshman arba ksheira, my ein mitztarfen kana ba'almaninu. But according to Reb Yehuda, who says even if there's 4 tefachim slabs, so what did the Mishnah, what did the brisa mean when it says they don't add up? If I say the words, they don't add up, it would have the connotation that even though there is a problem here, they don't add up to make a bigger problem. What the Gemara is challenging is, according to Rav's version of Reb Yehuda, which is they never made such a decree, so this piece of wood is just as kosher as a small piece of wood. So why is the brisa saying they don't add up to create a problem, which would sound like each one by itself is the problem, just they don't add up to make a bigger problem. According to Rav, there is no problem. This big piece of wood is 100% schach kosher. Right? It's like if I would tell you, you have a bunch of little pieces of wood as your schach, and they don't add up to make a problem. So you would say, why would I think they would add up to make a problem? You have 100 pieces of kosher schach. So according to Rav, why is Reb Yehuda saying 2 big pieces of wood don't add up to make a problem? According to Rav's Reb Yehuda, there is no problem. Gemara says you're right, but I need to come Reb Meir mitztarfen, Reb Yehuda mitztarfen. Rav will tell you that since, in the opinion of Reb Meir, I agree there's a problem, and Reb Meir was saying not only is it schach pasel, but it even adds together to knock off your sukkah. So Reb Yehuda, the Brisa presented Reb Yehuda using the same words, which was ein mitztarfin. They don't add up, even though it's true in Reb Yehuda. Rav will tell you it's true in Reb Yehuda to really say there is no problem. But why did the Brisa not say the words there is no problem? Because there was the contrast of the words of Reb Meir, which was not only is it schach puzzle, but they even add together to knock off the sukkah. Okay, let's stop over here. You don't have to make it up. In Mitzvah Hashem, we will cover some ground. If you look at tomorrow, assuming we're not going to read Tosas together inside, tomorrow we should be able to make up some ground.